Hi there, this is David, and welcome to my annual RPG Awards. These are all the best RPGs from 2023. We're going to be going through them category by category, just like a regular awards show would, because I don't tend to really agree with the big boys and their awards. I have a separate taste. I have an old school taste, and I think a lot of y'all out there do too. So I do want to go over all these great RPGs, and hey, if you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe for some more top 10 lists, reviews, and news, and hit the like for the ratio. And also, if you like this shirt, you can buy it yourself. It comes here in this kind of baseball tee or a regular t-shirt. It's going to be for a limited time only from now until the end of the year. So our first category that we're going to be going over out of the 12 RPGs that we're going to be featuring here is the biggest surprise. We have 2 nominations. We have One Piece Odyssey and Monochrome Mobius Rights and Wrong Forgotten. And our winner is Monochrome Mobius. I really didn't think that I was going to enjoy One Piece Odyssey as much as I did. It came out at the beginning of the year and I'd never watched the anime and I don't really know all that much about it. But despite that, I thoroughly enjoyed the game. So that being said, it's going to take a lot to knock it off the pedestal. But the sleeper hit Monochrome Mobius Rights and Wrongs Forgotten took it down. Before I played that game, all I knew was that it was a turn-based spin-off of the Utuwa Rumono visual novel series, but I thought, oh, that probably means it's going to be like 90% visual novel and like 10% turn-based battling. But I am happy to say I was wrong. This is a full-fledged classic RPG featuring fully explorable towns, a world map filled with treasures, and on-screen encounters. And this battle system is one of the most unique ones that I've ever seen. I can really only compare it to something like Grandia, where you have to use critical hits to knock your enemies into the longer outer rings, while at the same time keeping your party inside the smaller inner rings. It's really strategic and a whole lot of fun. Oh look, I did a costume change! But now it's time for our next category, the best retro revival. A retro remake that I just happen to love. A category right after my own heart, cause I love some retro RPGs. And for our nominations, we have Batten Kaitos 1 and 2 Remastered, the Super Mario RPG Remake, or Rhapsody Marl Kingdom Chronicles. But the winner has gotta be Super Mario RPG. I'll level with y'all. There were a lot of remakes this year, and all of them were pretty high quality. None of them were rushed or botched. All of them had tender, loving care put behind them. But none so much as Super Mario RPG, originally released for the SNES. There aren't a whole lot of changes here from the original over on the Switch, just a couple of quality of life additions here and there, like fast travel, and having your perfectly timed attacks hit all the enemies. But I think that that's part of the joy and the experience. It's the same game that we all know and love, but with a few little added bells and whistles, and nothing to detract from the simple and sweet story. But I've gotta say, what really makes it rise above the rest here is the history that's associated with it. I never thought that we'd see another entry into the series because it single-handedly caused the rift between Square and Nintendo back in the day. It was the catalyst for Square going over to Sony and the PlayStation. But now, with the partnership between Square and Nintendo stronger than ever, we have a chance to see another Super Mario RPG rather than another Paper Mario. Because I've gotta say, all the newest Paper Marios are like a shell of their former selves. They're barely even RPGs nowadays, and we need something like this to fill that void. And now for another subgenre of RPGs, we have the best roguelike, which isn't exactly a genre that I'm well known for loving, but hey, it's there, and there are some good games in it. So our nominations are Silent Hope and Void Terranium 2. And the winner, Silent Hope. Roguelikes aren't exactly my favorite genre. I kinda have like a love-hate relationship with them. Yeah, the exploration is fun, and so is the battling, but for me to fully enjoy a game, I need a bit of variety and a bit of story, and I think that that's why I like Silent Hope so much. Rather than just choosing one character at the beginning and then having to trudge through a 100-floor dungeon, I can now go through with 7 different heroes that all play differently from one another. If you want a ranged attacker, choose the archer. If you want to use magic, choose the wizard. Or if you just want to go in guns blazing, swords fighting, choose the warrior. It's all up to you. and you can change out your hero at any time. The whole thing is just such a fresh take on the genre. I am shocked that it flew under many people's radars. And now for the best monster capturing RPG. I've actually gotten into Pokemon a lot more in these past years, so the Pokemon DLC is a nomination, the indie RPG Cassette Beasts is a nomination, and Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince is up for nomination. But y'all know me, I love Dragon Quest. It's gotta be the winner. I have always thoroughly enjoyed the Dragon Quest series, and Dragon Quest IV is one of my favorites among them. I love this new take on the formula. Rather than just having to explore randomly generated dungeons with little to no story, here we get fully fleshed out worlds as well as stories that tie into the mainline game. Now, rather than seeing the events from the hero's point of view that we all know, you see the world from the villain's point of view. And you also get to explore much more of the underworld, which was just tiny back in the NES game, but here it is massive, with each echelon housing its own unique monsters, tons of treasures, towns, and dungeons. Not to mention that they all change with the seasons too. There's just so much content here. And I love this new direction that the Monster series is going. Whereas Treasures expanded the backstory of Eric and Dragon Quest XI, now this has expanded the backstory of Dragon Quest IV, and it's a masterclass in how spin-off series should be done. And now we're looking at the best evolution of a series. What that means is the best spin-off or the best sequel, just which series kind of evolved the best and surprised us in a good way this year. We're going to be looking at Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie as a nomination, Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince, and Atelier Ryza 3. And the winner is Atelier Ryza 3. In this category, we're going to be looking at sequels and really getting down into the nitty-gritty and deciding which sequel truly rises above the rest. I mean, the goal in creating a sequel is to make a game better than the one that came before it, but I've been around the block before. I'm over 40 years old, and I know that that is not always the case. But Atelier Ryza 3 definitely got the best iteration that the series has ever seen. I mean, this rivals another one of my favorites, the Xenoblade series, as having zones that are just absolutely massive, and Ryza and her pals can really go anywhere to gather the ingredients and make all the recipes. But I mean, as cool as all that is, I think what I happen to like the best about it is that it kind of like combines everything that's so great about multiple series. From the really fast-paced involved battles, to the aforementioned exploration, to kind of also pulling out like a Trails series, where you get to watch all your characters grow up around you. This is the third and final entry into Ryza's saga, and it concludes her trilogy, and I've gotta say, it is a wonderful way to send off these old friends. Now let's have a look at some spiritual successors. These are RPGs that are not a direct sequel to a classic RPG, but they are a spiritual successor in some way or another. Our first nomination is Trinity Trigger as a spiritual successor to Secret of Mana, and then secondly, Wargroove 2 as a spiritual successor to Advance Wars. But the winner, Trinity Trigger. Secret of Mana is one of my favorite RPGs of all time. I got it whenever I was 11 years old in 1993, and while it wasn't the first action RPG that I ever played, it was definitely the most beautiful, featuring a riveting storyline, a gorgeous world, fun characters, and music that is to die for. I just keep on waiting on Square to come out with something to top it, but they haven't yet. So enter Furyu. When Square don't, Furyu do. This is easily the closest thing that we've gotten to the original Secret of Mana since Trials of Mana, with 3 party members, a ring weapon system, a gorgeous world, fun characters, a riveting storyline, and puzzle-based dungeons where you use your weapons to solve all the riddles. Everything just clicked here with me. And while I do know that it did release to some mixed reviews, I am here to say that if you are an old school gamer like me, don't pay any attention to them, because this is the real deal and you're going to have a ton of fun with it. And here, kind of veering away from the JRPGs into Western RPGs, what was my favorite Western RPG of this year? I'm not well known for playing them, but hey, every once in a while I do dip my foot into that pool. Our nominations are Baldur's Gate 3, Diablo 4, and Starfield. The winner, though, has got to be Baldur's Gate 3. I don't play a whole lot of Western RPGs, and I think that anybody who's watched my channel for a hot minute is pretty aware of that fact. Honestly, whenever I was growing up, Western RPGs, universally sucked. I'm sorry, but they did. They were absolutely terrible, and anybody who's my age can attest to that. But somewhere around like the PS3 era, things started to change. So now, when they get such critical acclaim, I do have to stop and take notice. And unlike the vast majority of Western RPGs that I've played, this isn't action. Instead, it's turn-based, utilizing Dungeons & Dragons rules as well as dice rolls. And while I thought that it would be a little bit over my head, I caught on pretty quickly, and I found myself having a ton of fun with this open-ended RPG. Even though I ended up getting bashed over on Twitter for accidentally stealing the druid statue and killing everybody in town because I have no freaking clue what I was doing. But again, folks, that is the joy of games like these, playing it exactly how you want to. And now for probably my favorite subgenre of the RPG genre, the best turn-based RPG. We're looking at Octopath Traveler 2 versus The Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie. But the winner has to be Octopath Traveler 2. There was a time not too long ago when I was personally afraid that turn-based RPGs were becoming a thing of the past. All the internet gurus and keyboard warriors were screaming from the rooftops, saying that the only reason why it was ever popular in the first place was because of hardware limitations. But I do think that this year has proved that little theory wrong. And while there were a metric ton of turn-based RPGs released this year, chief among them is Octopath Traveler 2. It took everything that was great about the first game, amped it up a notch, and included more character interactions and side stories to flesh out all of your party members. A game like this can kind of seem overwhelming, but it's actually beautiful in its simplicity once you figure it out. Basically, you go on through choosing a character that you just happen to like, and go through their story, and then just kind of continue on till you really can't make much more progress, so then you move on to the next character, all while exploring the entirety of the world. The whole thing is just so expansive and massive, and it reminds me of the RPGs from my childhood, where I had to keep a notebook next to me, jotting down caves that I found but I couldn't yet explore, or treasures that I couldn't open up yet. Maybe that might seem archaic to you, but to me, it's a sign of a great RPG. And now for the best strategy RPG. I love some strategy RPGs. I think that they're fantastic. And we actually had kind of an embarrassment of riches with a bunch of strategy RPGs coming out this year. So now we're going to be looking at Persona 5 Tactics, Fire Emblem Engage, or Disgaea 7. The winner, though, has got to be Fire Emblem Engage. All three of these games are excellent in their own right, but we can only have one winner. And while Disgaea 7 is a return to form, and Persona 5 Tactica shows Atlus taking the franchise in a totally new direction, you just cannot go wrong with the tried and true great granddaddy of strategy RPGs. And Fire Emblem Engage is a love letter to the fans, and after Three Houses focused more on social sims than battling, I personally was worried for the future of the series, because I personally always played Fire Emblem for the combat, not for the social sim aspects. So this game here was kind of like Nintendo coming over to me, patting me on the head and saying, "Don't worry, little David, it's gonna be alright. Fire Emblem as you know it isn't changing or going anywhere." Thank goodness for all that. So not only is this a return to form with battling, but you get to meet some old friends along the way and fight with heroes of the past games that you've always loved. And with a long history spanning all the way back to 1990, they have a lot to work with here. And now for Best Action RPG. Here our nominations are Final Fantasy XVI. I mean, you can't have an end-of-the-year RPG list without mentioning Final Fantasy. But what about Dragon Quest: The Adventures of Dai? You also cannot have an end-of-the-year RPG list without mentioning the great granddaddy of RPGs, Dragon Quest. But then there's also that long-running Legend of Heroes series. We have 3 legacy series up against each other with Nayuta Boundless Trails. And the winner of these 3 classic legacy series has got to be Nayuta Boundless Trails. I really enjoyed these 3 games for different reasons. The Adventure of Dai seamlessly combined the animated television show along with action-based combat, while Final Fantasy XVI took that iconic series in a completely new direction. But the same can also be said for Nayuta Boundless Trails. I mean, the Trails series isn't exactly known for their action combat or Metroidvania exploration, but that's what we have going on here. In Lost Heaven, the climate is all out of whack, and it's up to you to go through the stages and restore them to their rightful seasons. Along the way, you'll gain new powers and new magical spells, and once you've changed the seasons successfully, you can go back and then change them back and forth to whatever you like. So, with 4 different seasonally themed worlds, and 4 different seasons, obviously, there's really a ton of different stages available to you along the way. So, once you restore the original seasons, the entire stages change. You might go through the first time in winter, where everything's frozen, but then go through it again in summer, where it's filled with water, but then again in autumn, where all the trees have fallen down, or lastly in spring, where there's vines being grown. Everything changes, new secrets unlock, and it allows for a ton of exploration and just a boatload of fun. And now, before we do get to our best overall RPG of the year, we're going to be going over the best indie RPG of the year with 2 nominations, Sea of Stars versus 8-Bit Adventures 2. The winner though, Sea of Stars. Both of these games are great, and both of them were trying to bring you back to a simpler time and emulate experiences from games of my childhood, and I highly recommend both of them. 8-Bit Adventures 2 did this by harkening back to the early Final Fantasy games on the NES, while Sea of Stars took us back to Chrono Trigger. And yeah, you hear about indie RPGs inspired by Chrono Trigger all the time. For real now, they're like a dime a dozen. It's always like, hey you, remember that great game from the 90s? Here's one that's similar, but for whatever reason, it's worse. Go off and enjoy it. So now, I'm not here to say that Sea of Stars is better than Chrono Trigger or worse, but I am going to say that it does its own thing, and what it does well. The music is breathtaking, the world absolutely gorgeous, there's secrets around every single corner, and the characters are lovable. But it's really the story where it shines. It's going to have you on the edge of your seat. And yeah, I do believe that the battle system could have used some help, but again, you can only judge a game based upon its merits and what it is, not on what you want it to be. And Sea of Stars' merits do speak for themselves. And finally, our last category, the overall best RPG of the year. We have a lot of games that I could look at, from Final Fantasy 16 to the Super Mario RPG remake, to Octopath Traveler 2, to Star Ocean 2, to Atelier Ryza 3. There's a lot out there, but Star Ocean 2 remake takes the cake. With so many great games out this year, I would love to talk about all of them, and I really have on my channel throughout the course of this entire year, and I've tried to cover the high points here. But at the end of the day, I have to make a decision and crown one of them as the best RPG of them all. It was really difficult for me, but I've got to say, Star Ocean 2 stole the show. Not only was this game just about perfect on the original PlayStation, but this remake took everything that was great about it, amped it up a notch, and also worked out any kind of hardware limitations to really create a flawless experience. All of the party members have been rebalanced so that they're all useful, there's been new secrets and treasures added, and it's beautifully overhauled graphically. The skill system has been overhauled to be more user-friendly, and the world map. My god, the world map. Not only is it absolutely gorgeous, but encounters occur on screen. There are treasures everywhere, and it's so much fun to be able to call a little bunny and go hippity-hopping all over the place. If there's one thing that 2023 is going to be known for, it's going to be all the great retro revivals and getting back down to the basics of the genre. And I think that is epitomized in my RPG of the year. Nothing says back to the basics like an extraordinarily well-done remake of a PlayStation classic from over 25 years ago coming on in and stealing the show. This should scream loud and clear to every single company out there. RPGs are not dead. There is still a market for classic RPGs of yesteryear, and not everything has to turn into some sort of flash-in-the-pan, style over substance nonsense in order to sell. You make a great game, and it's going to sell based upon its own merits. I just wanted to thank you all so much for joining me for my annual RPG Awards. Thank you so much for coming into my home each and every day with these videos. I thoroughly enjoy welcoming you all into my little world, my little slice of the universe. I really greatly appreciate all of you, each and every one of you. Thank you so much. And again, if you would like to order this shirt, there is a link down in the video description for that. My Patreon is open as well. But again, all of y'all, enjoy the holidays, enjoy December, and have a great day.